Hello, everyone. Today we have the lovely Courtney Marie with us. Courtney, go
Mhm.
ahead, start us off. When did you get diagnosed with diabetes?
I was diagnosed at age 13, which was 20 years ago. So quite a bit ago. I don't remember life without it anymore because I'm getting old. And it's like has been a part of my life for so long that I don't know what it's like to not have it. But yeah, at 13 was a little rough because, I was a teenager and teenage years are hard, and then all of a sudden you're diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, which was pretty traumatic for me.
Okay.
um yeah.
And that was about 15 years ago, you said?
20
20 years
20
ago. Okay, okay.
20 years ago. Yeah,
Fantastic.
20 years ago. I remember being diagnosed. It was like a couple days before my birthday, and we were supposed to have a big like pool party in my backyard, and what like that was my birthday present, type 1 diabetes. So, but I had been sick for a while before then. I want to say I was, going into DK. I probably was in like very deeply into DKA because I remember being sick for a good like 3 4 months, and it just got worse and worse and worse. Like it started off with being thirsty and going peeing a lot, but then it got to the point where I was just so lethargic, losing dramatic amounts of weight. I remember it was like the same period every day in middle school. Sixth period, right after lunch, it was my social studies class, and I remember the teacher getting so mad at me because I was falling asleep every day in class. And she's like, you need to get more sleep, you're not getting enough rest. And I'm like, I can't help it. Like, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I can't help it. And she felt probably really bad when she found out why I was falling asleep in class. But yeah, so it was a long time coming. Back then, we there wasn't many people that had it when I was in school. Now it just seems to be happening more and more. But back then, I think there was only one other kid that was in my middle school that had it. So we didn't know the symptoms. My mom, I remember like just telling her like I don't feel good, and she could tell I lost a lot of weight. She thought I maybe had mono. They took me to the doctors, and my pediatrician actually really like saved my life because he was going to let me go. They took blood from me because they were going to test for mono, and he like took one look at me and made us wait and give a urine sample. And with that, it was I had a lot of ketones in my urine. And I think I don't remember the exact number, but I know it was upwards, like around 1,000, my blood sugar when I got to the hospital. So they had said if I hadn't made it there within a day or two, I probably would have been in coma.
Yikes.
So
Well, you
yeah.
really did make a good call there. Thank
Yeah.
God.
Oh my gosh, yeah. He saved my life. He did because, it's very people don't know the signs. They still don't really. But back then they really didn't. And I think I would have probably been one of those tragic cases if my pediatrician didn't like make that call.
I see, I see. And when you were diagnosed, what did they tell you on how to manage it?
Uh, Back then there was no such thing as the rapid acting insulins they have now, but I was put immediately on regular and MPH. But it wasn't carb counting when I was diagnosed. They put me on like what they call a sliding scale. So you would take insulin prior to eating, but it was based off of what your blood sugar reading was. So I don't remember the exact numbers or like what units I was taking back then, but it was all based on what my blood sugar was. It wasn't based on carb counting.
Hmm.
There wasn't any carb counting back then. That didn't come out until I didn't learn about carb counting until I was looking into getting an insulin pump, which was probably about, I want to say like 6 or 7 years after I was diagnosed.
Okay. And did they give you any nutritional advice?
Yeah, I mean, well, see, that's the thing that I think is really odd nowadays is back then, they immediately told me when I was diagnosed in the hospital, do not drink any sugary drinks. Like, you need to only drink diet drinks. They told me to watch how much carbohydrate I was eating, but it wasn't no, don't eat any carbs. It was, watch what type of carbs you're eating and how much of them you are eating. Because like I said, it was a sliding scale. So each meal was supposed to have the exact amount of carbohydrate for that meal so that you could use the sliding scale based off of your blood sugar. If you were varying your carbohydrates too much, then it wouldn't work that way. It still didn't really work that way, but I'm guessing that's how they got the sliding scale kind of thing to work.
It's an odd system. How well was it working
Yeah.
for you?
Well, back then, it was not good. It wasn't good. I was having highs and I was having really low lows, and I didn't have a dexcom or anything like that. So it put me in some pretty scary situations. I remember going to the doctor, maybe, like after I was diagnosed, and him saying, "Oh, you're doing really well," because, they would just see like my blood sugar readings, and, they weren't in the 300s, so that was okay, but they were still like high hundreds, 200s, daily, most of the day, or super, super low. So even with my A1C readings, the A1C might have been, I think when I was first diagnosed, it was high, but maybe the first time I saw the doctor after that, maybe 7.5. But that was because I was having lows as low as 30 and highs as high as 350. So, I mean, that's really not controlled, even though it's a 7.5, and to them, that's a good number. It really wasn't at all.
Yikes! So basically, you were riding that blood sugar roller coaster, big time.
For years and years and years. And it just the thing about diabetes is, I feel like it takes time before you see the effects of what those blood sugars do to you. So like maybe you're a kid and you're diagnosed and you go through, years of roller coaster blood sugars, and you're not seeing like so many crazy complications, and then all of a sudden it hits you. And I didn't get any horrible complications, knock on wood, but it started affecting my memory, like my short-term memory. I couldn't remember things that, like, I maybe put my keys on the table, and then 10 minutes later I don't know where my keys are, kind of thing. And it started progressing that way, as well as my like anxiety and depression, like big time. And so that once all those three things started happening, and then you're adding roller coaster blood sugars and not feeling good, it almost felt like, like I was in a deep, dark hole that I couldn't get out of, and I needed to change, like it needed to change, because if it didn't change, I just felt like I was going to die. Like whether it was mentally I was going to die or physically, I just didn't, something needed to change. And so, I started looking for help, how to fix this, because I wasn't getting help from doctors. They would tell, one of my endocrinologists told me, and this was, like I said, I didn't have super, super high A1Cs, but that was because I was having such extreme lows, so it kind of bring my A1C down. So I remember seeing one of my endocrinologists, and my A1C was like 6.5. And she's like, you're my star patient. You're like my best patient. I'm gonna hang your picture on the wall. And I'm like, oh, really? Like back then, before I even found out about Dr. Bernstein or anything, I'm like, oh wow, I guess I'm doing okay, even though I didn't feel good, and I saw what my numbers were, but the doctor was saying I was doing okay. So maybe this is what I'm supposed to feel like, but it got to the point where it all started mentally draining me, like bad, like, I mean, you have type 1, so I'm sure you understand, like, it's a burden. And then when you don't have that burden under control, and you're constantly up and down, and you're worrying every time you go to sleep that maybe you won't wake up, like those things weigh on you heavy. And when it feels like nothing you're doing is fixing it, it's a scary place to be. It's a scary place to be. And I needed help. So, and I learned after, this was 2 years ago. So 18 years of having type 1 and not getting anyone teaching me how to fix this situation. I knew that I had to do it for myself. No one was going to fix this but me. No one was going to fix this. Just like Dr. Bernstein says in his book, you know, like you are the sailor of your own ship. You are the one that can control if you're going to have good blood sugars or not. And he's right. Like, that's probably my biggest advice to anyone that has type 1. Like, you need to learn this disease like the back of your hands. You have to research it. You have to learn it, and you need to perfect it for you, because no one's going to do it for you. So that's what I did. I started researching, and I stumbled upon Dr. Bernstein's book, I think on like Barnes and Nobles or something. And so I'm like, oh, okay, I saw the book, and then I started like Googling the book, and I started seeing that people were like having good results with it. So I grabbed it. And at first, when I started reading it, it was a little daunting because it's very detailed, and it was kind of like, I'm like, I don't know if I can do all this, you know? But I'm like, I have to try because nothing is working. Nothing's working. And it didn't matter when they switched to the rapid acting insulin or when I got put on an insulin. Nothing was changing where I was, you know, none of those new things or carb count or any of that was changing it. So I said, I'm going to try it. And this was like, I mean, I really skipped ahead a lot because in between this, I've had 3 kids, you know? So like, I don't know if you want to go back over my pregnancies or anything, but those were scary too, you know, like they were scary times because I didn't have, you know, great control. So I was passing out and having super high blood sugar, super low blood sugars, taking a ton of insulin, gaining a ton of weight, like pregnant, you know. Luckily 2 out of 3 of my kids, well, all 3 of them were born healthy. But you know, it was a very scary time in my life. And so after I had my 3rd one, which was my daughter that's 2.5 now, I was at my lowest point, and that's where I said I needed to find help, and I found Dr. B's book and so on and so forth. But she was probably the hardest out of my pregnancies to control my blood sugar. My blood sugars were constantly high to the point where, like, I mean, I was taking over 100 units of insulin a day, and they just weren't coming down. It was really hard, and I gained like 100 pounds. Like it was a really rough time in my life. I had to have a C-section because she was so big. She was 9 pounds, 15 ounces at birth. My other 2 were normal sizes, 6'13" and 7'12", but she was bigger because I had very high blood sugars with her. And so after she was born, and that traumatic, going through a C-section, and her being so big and all that, that's when I need to change this because I have 3 kids to live for and myself to live for, a husband and everything else. And then I found Dr. B, and I started implementing it into my life. Now, I don't do it the same as what he suggests in the book, only because I'm not MDI. I use an insulin pump. So I follow his diet, and I use the extended bolus feature on my pump to kind of mimic the way regular would work for protein and carbohydrate. The carbohydrate, I take my insulin in the extended bolus feature. I take that bolus up front for the carbs, and then I take the protein bolus over the course of 3.5 hours. But anyways, that's how I started doing. First, I started not doing it that way. I started just bolusing with my pump. But what was happening was, because I'm on Humalog, I was going low very fast because I'm using rapid acting insulin, and I'm trying to cover protein and carbohydrate with one bolus right away. And that was just not working for me. But I did notice that my blood sugars immediately, just by following his diet, were so like steady, you know, other than my dips, because I was not taking my extended bolus at that time. I was just taking it up front. The blood sugars were not skyrocketing immediately after I ate, and they weren't staying on these stubborn highs where I was taking all this insulin to bring them down, and then I'm low and then I'm high. They were staying like kind of not even like a hill, like just flat, you know, like with dips though. So then that's when I started. Then I found type 1 grit, and which has been phenomenal because it's helped me kind of twerk all these little things that I was having trouble with, and feed, like, learn from other people. and someone had mentioned the extended bolus feature, and that's how I started. I'm like, I gotta talk. I'm like, let me try this. It makes sense. It'll take that. Yes, it's rapid acting insulin, but I can make my pump give it to me so that it mimics kind of how long it would take regular to peak and go out of the system. So that's what I'm doing currently.
Okay. Fantastic. And just wanted to note, can you say something real quick?
What?
Okay. For a little bit, your audio was a little weird there, but it's good now.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we're good. We're good.
Okay.
So that's a very nice trip you had there, getting through all that. And
Yeah.
I guess I say at that time you were steady, but you had some potholes here and there where you were going a little low.
Yeah, and then mainly, and like I still think I'm gonna have what I plan on doing is starting taking regular for my protein, because I still have my issues sometimes. Like I do. Like I'm not gonna lie here. I do get low sometimes, and I really think it has to do with me only using Humalog for my boluses. And so that, I'm a work in progress, and I feel like most people that start this lifestyle, that's what it is. Like you have to kind of twerk things to work for you. And so that's what I plan on doing, is trying regular for my protein and see how that goes. And I think that'll kind of pull everything together. Because for the most part, I'm doing well. But like I said, I do have lows sometimes. And I really think it has to do with not using regular insulin.
Yes, I agree with that. There's always a new piece of the puzzle to solve when it comes to diabetes because it's such a manual disease. Even on low carb, there's still a lot of other factors to take into account, which is why
Oh my gosh,
the
yeah.
book, Bernstein's book, is not 2 pages, but
Oh
hundreds and
my
hundreds of
gosh, yeah.
pages.
And I think you have to read it and read the entire thing and then go read it again. And then like I still do it. Like I still am like, if I'm questioning something, I go back and I read it again, because it's so much information and it's so beneficial, and you can miss something. Like I've caught myself a couple times missing a few things, like, so I think that the book is monumental to change it and having normal blood sugars. I really do. But like for me, I know a lot of people use MDI and they feel more comfortable with it, but for me, I'm not ready to be fully MDI, and I'm going to tell you why. It's because my lifestyle is very chaotic at times, and I have 3 children. I'm constantly running. It's easier for me if I'm going to eat and then I'm not going to eat. I can just stop the pump, or I can give myself a temp basal, or maybe I'm going to exercise at this time, but I'm not going to exercise at this time tomorrow, so for using the pump is easier for me because I can make those changes immediately, and it's not long acting insulin that you can't shut off. So that's why I like the pump. And I'm going to continue to use it until I feel that it's not working for me. But at this point, it really is working for me. I just need to try regular for protein, And I think everyone's lifestyle, you have to you follow what Dr. B says as far as diet and insulin management, but you also have to take into account your lifestyle and how you live, and what works for you. And if you can get normal blood sugars, and maybe you do things a little bit differently than Dr. B as far as insulin goes, I don't really think there's anything wrong with that,
Yeah, there's more than one way to skin a cat, and
Yeah.
I would say just to mention this for anyone else who's watching that might be making the switch from Humalog to R as well. It can be a bit of a process. It can take some time to get used to it because it's a lot slower and everything. But I went through that same thing myself, using Humalog in a pump and then switching to R in a pump, and it takes time to get used to. But once you got it down, once you start actually bolusing ahead of time instead of right at the meal, stuff like that, it works pretty well. But anyways, I want to ask. We went through over a few of the complications you had before going low carb. Was there anything else that was going on?
I didn't have, I was lucky enough where I didn't have any other major complications. I think that I still suspect that I might have a dab of gastroparesis. I just think it comes with being type 1 for so long, but I don't know if it is gastroparesis because I don't get sick, I'm not getting sick. Just sometimes I'll have stomach aches or things like that. And sometimes I notice variations from like, and I'm talking like it'll be out of nowhere with my, like the same meal, like I'll notice a weird blood sugar come out afterwards. So the only thing I can attribute that to is some kind of digestive issue, but nothing so severe that, I was physically ill or anything like that. No.
Okay.
So I've been lucky enough in that sense. No eye issues. Although actually I was excited because the last time I saw the eye doctor, my eyes actually got better. So, I wear glasses and contacts, and the last time I saw the doctor, my vision got better than it was.
Fantastic.
So, yeah. So I think it has to do with being low carb,
What else has gotten
really
better
do.
for you?
My mental state. I have, but I also have anxiety and depression that runs in my family as well. So I don't attribute all of my mental issues with type 1, but I think it was like kind of like the trigger that brought it all out. So I think with having stabilized blood sugars, it's made my mental state so much better. And I think people that don't have mental health issues don't really understand how much it affects you if you do, and I have I'm talking debilitating anxiety, heart pounding, hyperventilating type of anxiety. And it was happening so much, so frequently that I couldn't live my life. I wanted to just like give up, it was that bad. And the minute I was able to stabilize my blood sugars, that went down dramatically. Now it's not 100% gone my anxiety, but it's manageable with a psychiatric medication and having normal blood sugars. Like it's way better than it was. It was to the point where it was torturous. I mean, I couldn't function, and I don't wish that on anyone. Type 1, I said at that time that, type 1 is hard. It is. And I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but having a mental health, like severe anxiety like that, I would rather have type 1 than have that. And having both of them, it was like a recipe for the disaster, it was bad. It was bad. So I think that with getting my blood sugar stabilized, it helped my mental state so much more.
That's fantastic. And I mean, personally, I believe food has a lot to do with mental states, even outside of diabetes. That's yet to be seen, though, as far as evidence. But that's what I suspect.
Think so too. I do. I think that I don't think anyone, even people that are not diabetic, should be eating extreme amounts of sugar. I just don't think it's good for anyone. I mean, there's proof that it breeds cancer. There's proof that it affects the body negatively. So I don't see why it wouldn't affect someone's mental state. In fact, I think there's a lot of people that have children that see how it affects children's mental states when they eat a lot of sugar. I mean, they're off the walls, it does affect your mental state. And I don't think it's good for anyone. I don't. And I think that there's nothing wrong with feeding your child healthy snacks that are within Dr. Bernstein's regimen. We didn't even get to the topic about how my 2.5-year-old was just diagnosed with type 1. So she was just diagnosed January 21st of this year. And it was like my biggest fear come to life, because I think that being a mom, was one of the biggest things I ever wanted to be in life. But then finding out that one of my children had the same thing that I have to deal with every day, day in and day out, was crushing for me, crushing. But at the same time, I was already following Dr. Bernstein's way of life. And so while it was crushing for me, I was prepared. So immediately when she was diagnosed, she was eating low carb, in the hospital, they were bringing her food. I'm like, no, she can't eat that. She can have She can have some string beans. She can have like grilled chicken. Like she's not, eating the potato and your ice cream and whatever else they're trying to give her. So I was prepared. And that was that much more better for both of us, because she has stabilized blood sugars and she's on very, very small amounts of Basaglar, which is a long-acting insulin. She's on 0.25 per day. That's it. Her body's still working. She's in honeymoon. But my goal is to, by having her eat this way, keep her beta cells from being too stressed. And so therefore, maybe I can preserve some of the beta cells that she still has functioning and hold off from using fast-acting insulin as long as possible. So that's the goal. And so far, we're doing really well. I mean, and it has to do with following Dr. B's regimen. 100% has to do with it. She's having normal blood sugars, and I can't thank him and type 1 grid enough, because I don't know where I would be in this moment if my child was diagnosed prior to knowing about this. I can't imagine being in that predicament. I really can't. And I'm thankful I'm not in that predicament,
It's amazing what you can do for your child if you actually know what to do starting out. And
right.
It really pains me to see the hospitals and doctors giving the kids all this terrible stuff when they could actually preserve their beta cell function, and some even manage to stay off insulin entirely for a while, and that's incredible.
And I don't know. I think that's great, but I don't know how I feel about that. That's another thing that we're going to have to cross soon. Actually, we're going April 24th to her doctor, her endocrinologist, and I have a feeling that they're going to try to fight me to take her off of Basaglar because her numbers are in normal ranges, but to them are too low. So like they wanted me to set her dexcom between 90 for a low and 250 for a high.
What?
Now, she's 2.5 years old. I'm not doing that. That's not what her that's not, absolutely not. So on her dexcom right now, I think I have her high at 130 and her low is at 80, just because I want to be able to catch God forbid if something was going wrong, but she's running in like the low 80s and sometimes 70s for the most of the day. Sometimes she'll have a 120 here or there, but for the most part, she's between 70 and 100 all day long. And I feel like they're going to say, well, she's having 70s and that's a low, so maybe we don't need to give her the insulin. And I feel like that is going to be a fight that I'm going to have to fight. And it's really sad. It's really sad that I'm going to have to fight that fight, but I feel like that might be what's going to happen. And it makes things so much harder. It makes things so much harder to have to work. Like, I think that is one of the biggest things I worry about now with her. More, not about her having low blood sugars or high blood sugars, not about what to feed her. No, it's about having to fight for what she needs to stay healthy. And that's sad. It's really sad.
It's a crying shame. We have enough to deal with on our plate as it is with having to manage diabetes. Now you have to fight the doctor too. It just...
Right.
It's insane.
Like, I mean, my doctor, my personal doctor now, I finally found a great one. And she's not 100% for low carb, but she leaves me alone. She sees my results. She writes my prescriptions. Oh, you're doing a good job. I don't have to see you for 6 months kind of thing. She's kind of hands off, does my blood work, and that's it. But they don't do that with children. They're very hands-on and sometimes overbearing, even knowing that, like, I've been type 1 for 20 years, they're pushing me to see a nutritionist. They're, oh, you need to set it at this, or, it was a fight for them to even let me put her Dexcom on at home. I'm like, I'm not driving 45 minutes to go to your office when I wear Dexcom every day. It's like, I don't need you to show me how to put it on my child because I use it every day, But these are the things, like, it's a constant fight. It's a constant fight. And it's just a shame. It's really a shame. It's really a shame.
I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm glad to see she's doing so well.
Yes.
Usually one of the pushbacks these doctors give is, oh, well, they'll never stick to it. How's your child doing as far as sticking to this diet? Is she happy eating this way?
Yes. Well, number one, she doesn't. She's only 2.5, so she eats what I give her. And she's always been a good eater even before this. And like I said, I've been low carb forever. So my kids, for the most part, even my ones that don't have diabetes, eat lower carb because I eat that way. So breakfast, like on the weekends, breakfast is normally low carb. Dinner is always low carb because I'm always cooking it. I don't have my older ones that are not diabetic eating as low carb as I am, but they eat gluten free. So they're very used to having rolled up like lunch meat for lunch, and eating lots of vegetables and things of that, meats for dinner with a vegetable. Sometimes we would do like a spaghetti squash or a palmini, and we don't eat regular pasta. So they're very used to that, and so she has always been used to that too. Now she doesn't get to have like a regular cookie, but I always have a cookie that she can have in the house, and and I don't believe in giving children tons of sugar all day long anyway. Like one dessert a day, and then if you want another kind of treat, it could be a sugar-free jello or something along those lines. But she eats very well, and she's not fighting me on it. And I hope that as she gets older, I'm just going to be real with her, and I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. And I'm going to tell her, this is the reason why we eat this way, and this is how you feel. And if you don't eat this way, you have chances of X, Y, and Z happening. And I'm not going to keep it from her, because I think that was one of the biggest mistakes, besides teaching me the wrong way how to eat when I was younger. The biggest mistakes I think any of the doctors ever had with me was not being real with me and telling me, you have a real risk of having serious complications if you don't do what you're supposed to do. They don't tell you that because they don't want to overload you. But I think that there's a lot of power and knowledge. And I don't think that, I think teaching your children the truth can be very powerful, because if they don't know what can happen, then what's stopping them from not trying. So
Exactly.
that's how I feel. I feel like she's never felt left out. I mean, if my kids, she eats ice cream that fits into the diet plan. She eats cookies that are fit into the diet plan. Birthday parties, we have cake that fits into the diet plan. She's never ever without. She's just eating foods that fit and help with keep her blood sugar stable, which is very important. And there's no such thing as attributing what you eat to being a kid. And that, I think, that is like my biggest message to any parent that has a type 1 child. Yeah, you cannot say that your child is not living like a child or having a good childhood because they're not eating a certain way. To me, attributing happiness with food is not setting your child up for goodness, because we have all these issues with obesity and overeating in this country, and you wonder why, because food is attributed with happiness. Now, food can bring you happiness, but it's not the end all be all, and it's not making a kid have a good childhood or not have a good childhood. That's not being a kid to me. And I hate that. That's like the number one thing I hear all the time. Well, let her be a kid. Well, she is being a kid, and more importantly, she's healthy. She's healthy, and she's not on the roller coaster blood sugar ride, and she's able to live and have a good life and run around and play and not worry about being in scary situations or what could happen because she doesn't have good blood sugars. I think that people need to realize what's priorities, what's most important in this type of situation. And type 1 diabetes is a chronic illness that can kill you and can cause serious complications if it's not managed properly. That is the truth. So my kid having a cupcake is not more important than that,
Yeah, and I feel like the people that say that don't really understand what it's like to have diabetes, especially when you're a kid. Because if you're to the point where you're relying on insulin all the time and you're going up and down all the time, you're not a kid anymore. You're a diabetic, and you don't feel you don't feel good the whole time. You
No.
don't feel good most of the time. And I mean, if I could go back in time and have my mom either give me more cupcakes or manage my blood sugar to the point where I'm not taking insulin all the time, I'm just taking a bolus like your kid is, I take the latter any day, you know?
Yeah. And that's how I feel. And I think, yeah, I think you're right in a sense. I think a lot of the parents, they don't know what it feels like. So they don't, and they're getting told, and on top of that, they're getting told by doctors, no, your child can eat whatever they want. Just give them, cover it with insulin. So you have a doctor, a professional that you're putting all your trust in, telling you this. And then you're being told that blood sugar ranges for a 2.5-year-old between 90 and 250 are where you want to be all the time. So what do you do with that information if you don't know any better? You
You just
believe it.
trust it.
Yeah, and that's sad, you know. And I don't want that for my kid because I know what it feels like. And I've been in scary situations and I've had ketoacidosis and I've passed out from low blood sugars and been revived from EMT workers, all because I ate what I wanted and bolused for it. So I'm not doing that with my child. And I will fight tooth and nail so that that's never the case. I feel lucky that if my child is going to have this disease, they're going to know how to deal with it properly. And I hope that people watching this that have a type 1 that are struggling or want to throw in the towel because they can't get those numbers, that they want. They want normal blood sugars for their kids, but they can't do it because their doctor is just telling them to bolus and forget about it, that they'll give it a try, that they'll read the book and give it a try and just see how it goes, because it's amazing when you really feel good, like I don't know how you felt when you first started doing this, but I remember very clearly feeling like, oh my goodness, this is what it feels like to feel good, like I forgot what it felt
Yeah,
like. And
exactly. Honestly, when I first found out, I was very angry and just sad at first because I was like, oh, I've been doing it wrong my whole life, and
yeah,
you want to
I
blame
was
yourself
too.
for it and all this
I,
other anguish. But once I got through that and actually made the switch, I mean, it's a transition, sure. You
I
still you
think it
still have a
always
lot to change, but it's 100% worth it.
Oh my gosh. I think you're right. Like it's a mix of emotions. So like you're, oh my goodness, I can't believe is what it feels like, but then you're mad because like how many years have you lost not feeling good, and then you're sad, and like all those it's unbelievable what it feels like, but it's, I know like 100% I'm never going back. And people say to me all the time, well, how do you eat that way? Oh my God, like don't you miss eating regular food? Don't you miss all the bread and the cakes? And I don't miss feeling that way. So like for me, and I always tell them, like, it's not just like a diet for me. This is like how I feel good. I feel good, and I won't ever take that for granted, and I won't ever throw that away for food ever. Food is fuel. Food is not happiness, and that's, I think people have to learn that, especially when it comes to type 1. I really think people need to learn that food is not happiness. Feeling good is happiness. Staying healthy is happiness.
That's a good quote. I might have to use that later. Anyway, speaking of food, walk us through a typical day. What do you and your child typically eat?
Um, Breakfast is most of the time either eggs, like a scrambled egg, with cheese. She'll have eggs with cheese, or I make her like a low carb pancake, which is essentially a little bit of almond flour, a little bit of cream cheese, an egg. I put a little bit of cocoa powder in there, stevia, mix it all up, and it's like and baking powder, and mix it all up, and it makes like 2 pancakes, and she thinks it's pancakes and it's really like egg. But she thinks it's pancakes, and it tastes good, and it doesn't affect her blood sugar, so she has that. I don't eat any fruit. She does have some berries like a very little bit of berries in the morning. And the reason why I do that is because, like I said, she still has some insulin working in her body. And I'm still noticing that at like the 2-hour mark, she will have a dramatic drop. So if I don't give her a little bit more carbohydrate for breakfast, she has a little bit of a dip when the 2 hour mark hits, and she's on Basaglar, which is the same as Lantus. So I noticed this distinct peak, like when it hits initially, and I have to counteract it because her body is still working at the same time. So for the most part, the dosage is working throughout the day, except at that moment, because it's like she ate breakfast, her body's working somewhat, and then the insulin kicks in at the strongest peak there. So anyway, she gets like maybe 2 strawberries in the morning. I cut it up and it looks like a lot more, but it's really only 2. And I weigh it on the scale. It's like 0.25 ounces or something like that. So that's normally what she gets. And and she either has to have like a bacon, like a piece of bacon, 2 pieces of bacon, or sausage, like that every morning. Like that's what she has to have. And say I don't eat strawberries, so I'll normally have like a like I don't really, and I'm not a big breakfast person, so like maybe a little bit of eggs, and I always have to have my coffee in the morning. And normally it's just like 1 egg or 2 eggs and sausage or something, but very, very little breakfast because I'm not a big breakfast person. I like my coffee in the morning, and I feed her breakfast. So if I'm going to eat, it's normally something she's eating. So that's normally what we have for breakfast. Lunch, I try to do lunch the same for both of us. So, but I'll change, like if I'm having, for instance, I'll make grilled chicken. So she'll have grilled chicken, I'll have grilled chicken, but I'll have grilled chicken on maybe like a spinach lettuce, like a salad. But she's not a big fan of salad. So I'll normally give her some green beans or broccoli on the side. And that's basically what she eats for lunch. I might add a little bit of bacon bits or something to my salad and a little bit of oil vinegar and call it a day. That's lunch. And then dinner is always it's got some type of meat in it, obviously. So in the beginning, I remember sticking to just like, say we were having steak, we have a steak and a vegetable, and then maybe I would take a little bit of like a butternut squash. I can't eat a lot of butternut squash personally, very, very little, because if I eat too much of it, it does spike my blood sugar. So I'll make like a mash out of the butternut squash, like a mashed potato, a fake mashed potato out of butternut squash. So it'll be like maybe broccoli, steak, and a little bit of butternut squash. That's what we have for dinner. Or sometimes if my other kids want to have pasta, we'll do like a palmini with a meat sauce. I'll make a meat sauce. And that's our dinner. So like we eat things that normal people eat or people that don't eat low carb, but we eat them low carb, and then dessert, sometimes I'll have dessert, sometimes I don't. She has dessert every night, and it's normally some type of low carb treat, whether it's a 1/4 of a cup of no sugar added coconut ice cream with a little bit of Walden's Farms chocolate syrup on it. She has something, and she feels like, oh, I'm getting a treat. And meanwhile, like I said, it works with her blood sugars, so she's not having those high blood sugars. She can eat it and it works, and she doesn't have any crazy spikes. And that's the most important thing for me, making her feel like she's eating foods that she likes, not feeling left out, and having good blood sugars. It's the best of all worlds.
I agree. That's fantastic. So yes, and that's a very good meal plan. Meat and veggies. That's exactly what I recommend to just about anyone. Keep it simple. You don't always have to make some really complicated recipe.
That's what I mean. I think in the beginning, for me, the beginning parts of it, and with the baby too, because like her especially, I don't like doing anything really complicated because, like I said, she's only on long-acting insulin right now. So there's no correction insulin for her right now. So I try to keep things as simple as possible because I know, I know the exact amount of carbohydrates she's getting. And I know it's very easy to take something in and out of that meal plan. Oh, well, maybe this affected, she's only eating 2 or 3 things per meal. I know what could be affecting her blood sugar versus a big complicated meal that I'm like, I don't know really what's causing the issue, That's how I feel for her. For me, I started the same way. when I first started, I ate very simple. It was very, very simple because it's easy to figure out the carbohydrate counts in those meals if you keep it simple at first. And then once you get those, your dosage for one meal after a couple of days, then you switch to another meal if you want to, but I think that keeping it similar and simple is the best way to go when it comes to starting. I really do. And I think that, adding and incorporating other types of low carb treats are really great, but I feel like you have to wait a little bit for that until you really kind of learn how to do this the correct way, waiting the proper amount of time in between meals, figuring out your dosages for certain, like a couple of different meals, maybe a week's worth of meals, or just maybe one day's worth of meals that you use for a week. Like keeping it simple, I think, is the best way to go at first, because it's a little overwhelming when you just are like, oh, I'm throwing in the towel, no more carbohydrate. Like it's very overwhelming at first. So keeping it simple makes it a lot easier. It's a lot of things to factor in, and simple is best at first.
Absolutely, absolutely. And is there any other wise tips you'd give for any diabetics watching this right now?
Yeah. And my tip would be that sometimes with type 1 diabetes, you can do everything right and it still goes wrong, and that's okay. As long as those wrongs are not outweighing the good, you're doing great. Wait, can you see me?
You're good.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So I think that it's important to remember that, it's a hard disease to deal with, and sometimes things go wrong or don't go quite as you expected, and it could be anything that affects it, and the key is to try to keep those to a minimum, and to remember that what you're doing is working, and celebrate the successes, and don't harp on the mistakes, because they're going to happen, unfortunately. And I think that it's hard not to try to be a perfectionist, and with type 1, being a perfectionist isn't the way to go, because you're never going to win. I don't think in normal life you win as a perfectionist, to be honest, but with this disease, I really think that you have to celebrate when you're doing great, and give yourself some grace when you trip or have a mistake once in a while. It's going to happen. And I'm not talking about mistake like eating the wrong thing. I'm talking about you figured out your dosage for your meal, you ate it at the same time, and you took your meal dosage, and you still had a little bit of a high. Sometimes that's going to happen, so you did everything the way you thought it was going to be, and you made a mistake, or something happened, your blood sugar was out of whack, and it could have been a million different things. Don't harp on that. Just learn from it. That's my advice. And I don't mean you can cheat. I don't believe there's any cheating with this. I think you have to just jump in and just continue to stay in the water when it comes to this way of life. I don't think there's anything good from cheating, but I do think that you're going to have mistakes once in a while for just having type 1. I mean, everything affects type 1. We all know this. So let's just not harp on the mistakes all the time. That's what I feel, because it's a hard disease to live with. And as long as you're taking the measures to try to keep your blood sugars as normal as possible by eating the right way and dosaging your insulin the right way, I think that's what you have to focus on, and learn from it, because it's constantly changing, especially as a woman. It changes a lot, like hormones and everything. It makes it really, really hard. So I just think you have to give yourself some grace.
I agree 100%. I mean, the way I see it, if the mistakes are the exception and not the rule, you're doing better than most diabetics already. So
right.
Definitely give yourself some grace, give yourself some slack. We all have those moments, even when you're doing everything right. Now, I think it's a good stopping point for today. Thank you again for sharing your story, Courtney. It was amazing, and just seeing your kids doing well, honeymooning, and accepting the low-carb approach.
I'll send you a picture of her with her dexcom. She's very proud of that dexcom.
Yes, I'd love to share that. I would love to share that.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad I was able to help. And this is, I think that like the more you spread out, thank you so much for doing this, because the more that you spread this and people learn from it, it's going to cause changes to be made, hopefully. So I think that this is great, and keep on doing it and spreading the word, because I
I,
think you're going to help a lot of people.
I believe it will. Thank you so much. And with your help and the rest of the community, we'll make great things happen. We'll end it
Oh,
there. Thank you again for your time, Courtney. This is how Courtney tamed her and her child's type 1.